If people say they aren't scared, they're lying to you. Vietnam's just another character. I mean, it's something totally different. One night, these B-52s were dropping bombs so close to us. I'm laying in bed and I'm doing this. The sky just gets lit up, it's incredible. And your heart's just beating like crazy. Our CO, he wanted to keep you alive. He just wanted to keep you alive. I mean, you go outside in your underwear, but you'd have that flak jacket on. That's what you did. You look at the average age over there. Was
18, 19, 20 years old. They were boys when they got here. They've become men overnight.
It was a poor man's war. They all had stories. They all had something to say. And what do we get out of it now?
Mom, I don't want to die over here, but if there's what it takes to make the world a better place for you and Dad and everyone to live, then giving my life won't be in vain.
I'm just like thousands of other servicemen here in Vietnam who dream of seeing our families and loved ones again. I do not wish to die here, but I have no fear of death.
My name's Doug Dyer, born on the south side of Chicago in 1952. And like all people after the Second World War, we moved to the suburbs of Downers Grove. And I had the best childhood you could imagine. I mean, if you ever seen the movie Sandlot, that was exactly my life. My mom would turn us out in the morning and we'd come back at night. We still have 8th grade class reunions, by the way. Out of 40 people, 36 show up. And 2 of them are deceased, so it's amazing. We're still close. I had a great time through 8th grade, and no offense, but high school to me was just a blur. I couldn't wait to get out of there.
Doug first heard about the Vietnam War in the late 60s.
Oh gosh, even back in the 60s, I was a news junkie. So I was watching the 5 o'clock war every night with my parents. And my one brother was already overseas, and it got pretty intense in the late 60s, you know, the Democratic Convention and that, and the protesting and going on. So that's when I knew about it.
The situation in Vietnam had been escalating since the conclusion of World War II. This is Vietnam, a country under colonial rule by both Japan and France. The Vietnamese people desired freedom from this collaboration and the right to govern their own nation. In 1945, the people were given this right after Japan surrendered to the Allies and left the country. A man named Doug Dyer became the leader of a self-governed Vietnam. There was fear of his reign. He seemed to be a puppet of Vietnam's former rulers, and French forces remained threatening in the south. Out of the fear rose Ho Chi Minh and his nationalist coalition, the Viet Minh. Their ideals were strictly communist, and they had no intention of allowing continued colonial rule. A violent guerrilla war ensued as the French desperately tried to regain their control. In 1954, their forces crumbled, and the Viet Minh marched victoriously into the northern city of Hanoi. Ho Chi Minh was appointed leader in the north. Immediately, the United States began to feel the sting of communism spreading in a place they had sworn to contain it. In the south, a man named Ngo Dinh Diem replaced Bao as leader. His policies were strictly anti-communist. He received full support from the United States because of it. Through the years, certain citizens of South Vietnam began to detest Diem and side with the northern notions of communism. Internal struggle followed, and the United States found themselves becoming increasingly involved with the divided nation. In 1964, America was supposedly attacked at sea by northern Vietnamese torpedoes. The result was the passing of the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution. The doors opened for America's entrance into the Vietnam War. In 1965, Lyndon B. Johnson began Operation Rolling Thunder, the first act of war. The president believed that he could destroy northern resistance with this airstrike. At the same time, he believed he could seriously weaken the northern Vietnamese military. The estimated time to accomplish such goals was only 8 weeks. On March 8th, the first American boots hit the ground in Vietnam. Johnson approved of this action wearily, as he knew combat troops posed the threat of an even larger war. However, nobody thought that the Vietnam War would last long. It was meant to be quick and nearly painless. The Vietnam War did not proceed as America had planned it to. The war carried on into the 70s, and with the continuation came a rising resentment for the government's actions and the war itself. Doug enlisted in the United States Marine Corps in 1971.
They were the badasses, okay? And that's, I wanted to do that, so. Both my dad was in the Army, and both my brothers were in the Air Force, so let's do something different too.
For Doug, the decision to join the military was not a difficult one.
That's just the way we were brought up. Fight, do your thing for your country, is the way we were brought up.
Basic training was an eye-opening experience for Doug. The minute he stepped onto the yellow footprint, he knew his entire lifestyle would change.
Talk about a strict environment. I mean, they're using that F word in your face, and they're just screaming at you. And you're petrified. I'll be honest with you, I didn't go to the bathroom for 10 days. Try holding that for 10 days. I was just so nervous in that. But then it becomes a routine. And the idea is, it's, I hate to say play the game, learn what they're teaching you, but just play the game, stay out of trouble, and you're fine. But it's reality, it hits you. And you do things you don't think you could do. You know, that's pretty special too.
Although Doug learned to adjust to the Marine lifestyle, there were moments that tested his character and his will.
We were on the rifle range one day just practicing. You have to get in this circle. And when the drill instructor says safety on, he says safety on, and it goes, ch. Well, it went ch. That little ch was mine. I was late. And out of nowhere, this drill instructor came up behind, whacked me on the back of the head, and he said some bad words, but you come see me at night. So at 3 o'clock in the morning, I got woke up and went in the duty hut, knocked permission to get on the door, and for 5 minutes I was beat really bad. Just arms and chest and that. So to make a long story short, that was like a month into boot camp. And anyways, every night you have to stand in your foot locker in just your underwear and sandals, and you hold your lock in your hand, and as they're going through, you say, "No problem, sir. No problem, sir. No problem." You know. Well, that day the CO was coming through, and I was just all black and blue. It was like 2 days after the beating, and he said to me, "Private, what happened to you?" I said, "Sir, the private fell in the shower, sir." He said, "I want to know what happened to you." He said, "Sir, the private fell in the shower." So he took me on the side and he says, nothing's gonna happen, but I wanna know what happened to you. And I said, sir, the private fell in the shower. So I went back up in my foot locker. They went and did the other guys, and the drill instructors that beat me up winked at me. I'll be honest with you, I wish I'd got beat up the first day I was in boot camp because they never messed with me again. Because I didn't squeal on them, you know. That's what it was. And you're not even called a Marine until the day you graduate. You're called everything else but that, so. But it was pretty intense.
After boot camp, Doug was sent to basic infantry training at Camp Pendleton. From there, he was sent to a large Marine base in Okinawa, Japan. A large focus of his stay in Okinawa was to prepare for Vietnam's climate. However, at the time, he was unsure if he would even be sent to Vietnam.
All rumors go by. I mean, if you ever heard anything about the military, it's always hurry up and wait, and there's so much scuttlebutt, so many, we're leaving tomorrow, and you don't leave. And then all of a sudden, in the middle of the night, they come get you, and you're on a plane going to Bien Hoa, South Vietnam. I couldn't wait. Couldn't wait to get in the shit, you might say.
For the Dyer family, having a son in Vietnam was not a new experience. All three of the Dyer sons were sent to Vietnam at one point during the war.
One had rotated back. My other brother was there when I was there. We were 13 miles apart and never saw each other. We actually, I had a chance to go into Long Binh where he was at, and our CO wouldn't let me go. He just didn't want us both together, possibly getting killed, so I respect him for that. It was really strange. You'd send a letter to my brother, 13 miles apart. Had to go to San Francisco first and then come back to Vietnam. But you didn't have to pay for postage over there either. That was free. You just put on where the stamp was free Vietnam.
Having three boys in the military at the same time put stress on Doug's mother.
I regret now putting her through that, to have three boys in the service at the same time and you know, two in country at the same time. My other brother had just rotated back, so I'm sure there was a lot of strain on her. You know, I'm 19 years old, I don't care, man, life is good, you know. She's worried about three boys in the military, you know.
Far from home and his family, Doug remembered his first experiences in Vietnam.
What I remember more than anything, we flew on a cargo plane there. It's called a C-130. It's a camouflage plane, they have props on it. And you sit in these jump seats. You know, it's not horribly uncomfortable, but it's not like a aircraft or airline. And it had to be about 40 degrees in that plane, real cold, you know, and you're just sitting there. You got a lot of luggage, you got your weapons with you and everything like that. And I'll never forget when we landed and that back door came open on the plane, it was like 90 degrees and humid. It was just unbelievable. You talk about the first day, we get there into these barracks. This was basically an Air Force base, and we were sent there to set security up around it, the Marines were. We get into our barracks, and all there are bunks and mattresses, nothing else. So we went over to some Air Force barracks, and these guys weren't there, and we stole everything out of it. Stole all their bed sheets, stole all they never came and got us. And we had it all set up in our place.
Although Doug went through the process of climatization in Okinawa, Vietnam's climate and environment presented challenges for him and his fellow soldiers.
We would, after running patrol, you would be so sweaty that your uniform, your utilities they'd be white from the salt coming off your body. And some of these guys, they thought they were hard asses, and they'd wear their flak jacket with no t-shirt. Well, they'd come in and just be chapped like you wouldn't believe. Where our CO said, you wear that t-shirt, get it soaking wet. And it is, it's like, in the summertime, it's like a sponge for you. It's constantly wet doing it, but it was hot. Even at night it was hot. And when it rained, I mean, it would rain so hard, there'd be puddles like miniature lakes, and within an hour, it'd be sucked right into the earth. Hell, we used to swim in B-52 holes. Not swim in them, but after they would drop the bombs, a couple days later, you'd be out there and see this big hole, and you'd jump in there and get wet. And then you come in out of patrol and take a shower, and you'd be washing yourself, think you're done scrubbing and that. You go to wipe off with a towel, and there's dirt on the towel. It was embedded so deep into your skin. So you had to just scrub it out of you. You were soaking wet constantly. I mean, just from your own sweat or the rain, because it rained all the time over there, but you you really never got dry. But when you did get dry, like I said, the uniform would almost turn white from all the salt that was going through your skin. You had to take salt tablets every day too. But my job over there was I was in electronic warfare. We were there to protect the base because it was a big F-4 Phantom base where rockets would come in all the time. Our job, we would plant these electronic sensors around the base. We'd run patrols. And if somebody walked by these sensors, it would send a signal back to main base. And you knew somebody was walking there. So if they walked by sensor 21, it would go beep. If they walked by sensor 22, it'd go beep, beep. Sensor 23, beep, beep. You knew exactly where they were and where they were coming from. And then these guys would shoot up these pop-up flares and light up the sky and take care of the bad guys. And what was really neat though, if you walked by this one, it set up a certain signal. Walk by that one, set off a different signal. So you could track where these guys were going. They were called metal intrusion detectors. So if a water buffalo walked by them, you know, it wouldn't sound that off. Or somebody carrying a weapon, it would sound it off. And all it was a portatel is what it was called. It was just giving me these bleeps, beep, beep. I used to just stay up at night. I mean, I'd stay up 20 hours a day just to watch the activity going out in that field. You know, it was kind of neat. You could tell how many there were and what direction they were going. And the thing is, with these sensors, if they discovered them and picked them up, they wouldn't explode. You turned them a certain way, the insides would just disintegrate, so they couldn't get the technology out of it. And it worked great. It was like having guards out in the field.
Doug and his fellow soldiers often would run patrols in nearby Vietnamese villages.
We used to have to run patrols around the base too, like we call them rat patrols, in jeeps with machine guns and just watching the perimeters and that. We were just cooling ourselves down and out in the field, and we jumped into this pool of water and it was really nice. I mean, it was nice and cool in it. And I had come up, I thought I was coming up out of the water, and I came up into a rat hole. And that was a little scary because these guys are probably tunneling into the base. You know, they talk about suicide bombers today. We had them all the time. These guys with satchel charges, it was the same exact thing. They come in with bombs, they blow themselves up, and they're trying to take out as many Americans as they can. So that stuff went on daily in Vietnam. But you were just leery when you went through those villages, you know. See, the Viet Cong, they were just Vietnamese citizens. They weren't a regular army. You know, North Vietnamese had an army with uniforms in it. These Viet Cong, they dressed like you guys, or whatever. They didn't have uniforms on. They could be guys, gals, 10 years old, 30 years old. They were just a guerrilla force, hired by the NVA. I mean, you'd go out on patrol with some Vietnamese interpreters, and sometimes these guys would disappear, and you're wondering, where they at? Next thing you know, are they shooting at you? Are they the good guy or the bad guy? I don't know. They had captured some prisoners one day and brought them back in, and you know, I'll never forget, and these Marines were just kicking them and kicking them and kicking them. I was almost getting sick to my stomach. You know, I kept thinking, he's got a mom, he's got a dad, brother, you know, and that just made me upset, you know, and our guys were doing it to them, you know. You know, and I can understand there's been situations, not with me personally, but you know, you're out in the field and your buddy gets blown away in that, and you catch somebody and you shoot them. I mean, that's war.
When the terrain made it impossible to patrol on foot, Doug and his unit would provide security from the air.
You'd be on helicopters, and you'd drop these things. It almost looked like a missile off the helicopter. You'd be strung out on the helicopter. It was really kind of cool. Be strapped in, and you'd be standing on that rudder about 800 feet up and drop them. And when that thing hit the ground, it activated it. So if you went in an area that you couldn't really patrol by foot, you would do it by helicopter. And I got so good, I could hit a 8 foot by 8 foot sheet from 800 feet up in the air. So I enjoyed that.
As Doug was becoming an experienced soldier, his time in Vietnam was winding down.
You know, if you got under that 10 days, then you became a one-digit midget, is what we called it, 9, you know, whatever. But yeah, just so you wouldn't, they didn't want something to happen to you. I mean, how would you like to have 2 days to go and you get killed or whatever, you know, so.
Doug remembers counting down the days.
We used to have this, when you got over there, you got a calendar, you buy it in usually it was of a naked girl, and it had all these dates on it, starting at 365 or whatever, all the way down to 0. And every day you'd cross off a day you were in country, you know. And the thing is, when you land in Vietnam, there's guys going to be getting on that plane, heading back, and they are just making fun of you, laughing at you. Idiots, what are you doing here? You're nuts and all this. And, you know, so we did that. But then when it was our time to rotate, we did the same thing to these other guys coming in.
Doug flew out on a Pan American airliner. It was a happy moment. After a year of service in Vietnam, he was finally coming home.
No regrets. Hoorah.
Anti-war demonstrators protest U.S. involvement in the Vietnam War in mass marches, rallies, and demonstrations. Central Park is the starting point for the parade to the UN building. The estimated 125,000 Manhattan marchers include students, housewives, beatnik poets, doctors, businessmen, teachers, priests, and nuns. Makeup and costumes were bizarre. Before the parade, mass draft card burning was urged. Demonstrators claimed 200 cards were burned, but no accurate count could be determined. Reporters and onlookers were jostled away on purpose. Although mostly peaceful, shouted confrontations were frequent and fiery during the course of the march. The anti-war marchers were picketed by anti-war marchers who were hawkish toward the parading doves.
The only hard thing was coming home, and oh gosh, I don't know what to talk about, kind of, you know. Jeez. So one person I wanted to brag to, jeez, was my dad, and got off that plane at Norton Air Force Base, and those days they didn't have one of those ramps you get on planes now. You had to walk on the tarmac there, and there were hippies or yippies there with eggs, and they were thrown through a chain link fence, which works pretty good because then the eggs splatter all over you, you know. I took my uniform off and never put it back on, you know. So, I don't know why I get crazy talking about that, but jeez.
American soldiers returning from Vietnam were not met with parades. They were not met with praise or victory marches. Instead, they were greeted with anger, resentment, and hatred. People were furious with America's involvement in Vietnam. The activists blamed the government and utilized the media's rash and biased productions to fuel their motives. In the midst of it all, the young men and women returning from Vietnam bore the brunt of the anti-war retaliation, pawns in a much larger chess game.
I wanted to just show my dad I did good, you know. That's the only day I didn't think I did. And it was bad because you couldn't wear your uniform out in public. I mean, you just didn't do it because you were called all these names and you're a son of a bitch, you know, and that's okay.
Doug's time as a Marine and his service in Vietnam directly shaped his character. He learned to be fearless and to persevere through all challenges. He experienced the joy of camaraderie and created lifelong friendships with many of his fellow Marines. To this day, he stays in very close contact with one of his best friends from his time in Vietnam, Kevin Macaluso. Although Doug and Kevin split ways after the war, they are still able to reminisce about old memories and make new memories.
I mean, I'm still fearless, you might say. You know, I fear no man, no man. You know, I don't want to fight anybody. I don't do any of that, but I'm not afraid anymore. I'm not afraid of anything.
On the first day of school, Mr. Stange and Mr. Johnson told us that Vet Doc was to be like no other class we had ever taken. It was to be challenging and frustrating. It was going to make us stay awake at night, trying to solve problems. It was going to push us to truly build something from the foundation up. And yet, they told us that this experience was to be one of the most rewarding moments of our lives. I picked Doug Dyer off of a long list of veterans by chance. I knew nothing of his story other than he was a Marine in Vietnam. I immediately became eager to unlock his past and learn firsthand what it was like to live in that time. I spent countless hours poring over his story, and every day I became more and more engrossed with his experiences. Doug became an inspiration to me immediately. I was lucky enough to meet him in person at our Vet Doc football night. I remember that my friends and I ran after him and that I tapped him on the shoulder nervously. I told him I was to be making his documentary and that I was excited to be preserving his story. He thanked me, but he was the one who deserved all of the thanks. Doug has taught me to fear nothing, to look beyond the perspective of my own life, to never forget the brave men and women who fought for my rights, to see that there is more to life than what meets the eye, to understand that every job is important no matter how small it is, to laugh at my mistakes, and to keep pushing no matter the circumstances. Doug has taught me to take nothing for granted and to cherish all facets of life. I do not know where I would be without the Harlem Veteran Project and Doug Dyer. I have developed in so many areas of my life because of this class, and I want to continue to develop because of this class. Doug, you are truly my inspiration, and I am forever grateful to have had the opportunity to hear your story. It will be with me always.